C Corp versus S Corp. Many people compare LLCs and corporations as entity types for their business. If you are convinced that a corporation is the right choice for you, then there is another choice to make. Do you want to set up an C Corp or an S Corp? A corporation can be either classified as a C corporation or an S corporation. Now, they have major differences that may be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how you envision running your business. Let's explore the similarities and differences of a C Corp and an S Corp. Similarity number one is management. As a corporation, both a C Corp and an S Corp follow essentially the same requirements. Both are required to have at least one shareholder, which is an owner. They're required to have a board of directors, at least one. And they are also required to have officers, usually a president and secretary. In this regard, they're pretty similar. Similarity number two, protection from liability. When a corporation is formed, the corporation is technically a separate legal entity from its owners. This means the corporation can then take on its own debt and obligations that are separate from the owners. In other words, the owners of the corporation are not liable for those debts and obligations of the corporation. This liability protection is the same whether you form a C Corp or an S Corp. We looked at the similarities. Now, there are some critical differences to understand between a C Corp and an S Corp. Difference number one is ownership. The owners of an S Corp and C Corp are both referred to as shareholders. The ownership interest of a shareholder is evidenced by the amount of stock or shares that they own. But who can be a shareholder makes these two very different from one another. Let's look at the ownership from four angles. Shareholders. In a C Corp, there can be an unlimited number of shareholders, and the shareholders can be a person or a company. Whereas an S Corp can only have up to 100 shareholders, and those shareholders have to be persons and cannot be a company. Location of shareholders. In a C Corp, shareholders can be located in the U.S. or they can be foreign, outside the U.S. Whereas in an S Corp, shareholders must be U.S. citizens or resident aliens, which means if you reside outside the U.S. or are on a U.S. visa, you cannot be a shareholder in an S Corp. Stock. The C Corp can issue different classes of stock, such as voting and non-voting classes of stock, whereas the S Corp cannot issue different classes of stock. It can only issue one class of stock. Investors. C Corps are more attractive to investors and foreign persons due to its flexibility in shareholder limits and investor residency, whereas the S Corp is more popular among people who want the corporation to be closely held. Another difference are federal taxes. Taxation is a major differentiating factor between a C Corp and an S Corp. A C Corp pays taxes as a corporation. This also means if the corporation distributes profits to its shareholders, the shareholder would pay the tax again on this income from the distribution. Because this goes through taxation twice, once at the corporate level and again when the corporation distributes profits to the shareholders, this is often referred to as double taxation. This is unique to a C Corp. However, an S Corp, despite being a corporation, is taxed as a pass-through entity. What does this mean? As a pass-through entity, the profits and losses of the S Corp pass through to the owners of the S Corp. The owners, or shareholders of the S Corp, then report the profits or losses of the S Corp on their personal taxes, thereby avoiding the double taxation of corporations. So we looked at a few similarities and a few differences between C Corp and S Corp. Let's wrap this up. Both C Corps and S Corps are advantageous for business owners, but the differences come down to your expectations for your company as an owner. If you wish your corporation to be closely held by you and your family, then you might want to consider an S Corp. But if you believe that your idea and corporation are the next big thing and you want to quickly scale your business, then you might want to consider a C Corp so that your company can attract a wide range of investors from virtually all over the world. Once you have chosen a business type, then you can focus on running your business.